Okay, so where we ended up. Okay, now we're going to. Okay. So where we left off last week was with the uniqueness of the Bible. We talked about the uniqueness of the Bible. But the amazing uniqueness of the Bible does not make it true. It makes it interesting, it makes it unique, it makes it unlike anything else, but that doesn't make it true. And so how do we know that the Bible is true? How do we know that these 66 books are telling us the truth? And so we're going to talk about that we're going to talk about that as we look at the book itself and compare it to other things. We'll look at several different tests that are made. Oh, don't let me forget before the end. Well, we'll be done before the end of the hour. I also had another video to play for you, another 1 minute apology. Played before, but we'll play it after. So, the amazing uniqueness of the Bible doesn't make it true. So how do we know that it's true then? So we're going to look at several tests, several proofs for the Bible. There are 3 tests that are looked at. One is called the Bibliographical Test. One is called the Internal Evidence Test, or Internal Evidence Test, and then the External Evidence Test. So let's talk about each of those just briefly, and then we're going to dive into the first one. And then we'll stop there because before we get into prophecy, I don't want to start that and then stop it. Well, you'll understand why. So the first test is the bibliographical test, and as you can probably tell from biblios, right, meaning book. It's the test of the book itself, and there are 2 different bibliographical tests. One is the method of the scribes. And so we're going to talk about that first. And then the manuscript comparison. That's called textual criticism is another name for that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit too. So this is examining the ancient texts themselves, both looking at the texts and how we got them, how they were handed down to us. And so how they were handed down to us has to do with the scribes. And so we're going to watch a video in just a second here on that. But then when we talk about manuscript comparison, we're talking about 2 different things, two possibilities. One is comparing the text of the Bible and how we got the text of the Bible to other ancient writings. And we'll do that in just a little bit. And then the other part of textual criticism is to compare the actual different fragments of the Bible that we have, the different parts, we have whole books, we have whole copies of the New Testament, but the earliest texts are just fragments, are sometimes a chapter, sometimes a sentence, sometimes just a few words. And those are the oldest ones. And so how do all of those manuscripts, all those ancient manuscripts line up with each other? Like, does one of those manuscripts say, and then the disciples took the guards and grabbed Jesus' body and ran? No, none of them do. But how close are they? How much do they line up with each other? Look, these tests are critical to us knowing this. This is academic. I'll admit that. This is academic. But here's the thing. It's never far from faith. Because if I'm going to say, I believe in the Bible, I believe the Bible is the Word of God, I believe it is true, I better have evidence for it, right? We talked about that all year, evidence that, demands a verdict. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. That how do we know Jesus rose from the dead? There's evidence. We do not have a fairy tale faith. We have a reasoned faith. And we have reason to believe that what we hold in our hands as Scripture is true and is from God. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about it in a kind of academic way, but it is not an academic exercise. So that's the internal, that's the bibliographical test. And then the internal test is just what it says, like looking at the different texts and seeing if there's any discrepancies within the Bible itself. Are there any things that deny something and then agree with it? Are there anything that things that don't match up with each other? And so when we look at the internal test, when we look at what's in the Bible, we talk about prophecy, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Like there are hundreds and hundreds of prophecies in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. Did they happen? And the Bible itself says if a prophet makes a prophecy that doesn't come true, you can forget about him. You can ignore him because his prophecy didn't come true. So did those prophecies come true? And then archaeology. Now, archaeology is both internal and external because we read about archaeology in the Bible, right? And does that archaeology fit what we see outside the Bible, what we see in real life? Does it fit what other books say as well? So it's listed here as internal evidence because it's in the Bible, but there's also an external component to it. And then external evidence is what works of literature are there outside of the Bible that confirm the Bible, that confirm the accuracy of the Bible? Is there any other writing, non-Christian especially writing, that corroborates what the Bible says? And we have plenty of that. There's a guy named Eusebius, who was an early church father. He was a Christian. But there's also Josephus, who was not a Christian. I don't know what he was. He was a Roman citizen, not by birth. He was Jewish by birth. And when the Romans came and razed Jerusalem, he begged a soldier, said, "Take me with you, I'll be your slave." And so he was a Jewish boy that went away with the Romans and ended up being the foremost historian in Rome. And then Tacitus, another Roman, Cornelius Tacitus, who wrote the Annals. So that's the external evidence for the Bible. So the first thing we're going to talk about in the bibliographic text is how did it come to be? Like, we don't have any originals, like nothing yet anyway. We haven't found any writings that are the original writings, the original things that Paul and John and Peter and Luke wrote. We don't have those. We have copies, probably copies of copies of copies. So then how do we know that those were transcribed, that those came to us faithfully? So here's a little, and this is about Old Testament scribes, but the New Testament was transmitted in a much, much similar way. So here's this.
The scrolls would eventually wear out and were given an honoured burial, but first copies were made.
So I'm going to read to you a little bit more about the scribes. So some of these are repeated, but not all of them. As it said there, that the word scribe comes from the word meaning counter, and they counted everything. They counted letters, they counted sentences, they counted lines, and in 1 Chronicles 2:55 it mentions the clans of scribes who inhabited Jabez. So this was a clan of people that this was their job. They followed it with strict discipline, with regarding the scriptures. They were meticulous and very faithful in their job. So here's some other things that were true of the scribes. The text was written on the skin of a clean animal. In other words, an animal that was perfect, an animal that would have been suitable for sacrifice. The scroll was prepared for use in the synagogue only by a Jew. Only Jews could be scribes. It was fastened together with strings from a clean animal. Each skin contained a specified number of columns equal throughout the entire book. So each page, if you will, had the same number of columns. The length of each column extended no less than 48 lines and no more than 60 lines. The length of the breadth of each column consisted of exactly 30 letters. Every column was exactly 30 letters wide. Each scribe used a specifically prepared recipe of black ink. An authentic copy of the text served as an example for each scribe to follow. The scribes were to copy nothing from memory. The space between every consonant could be no more than the width of a thread. The breadth of between every section must be the same as that of 9 consonants. Between every book was the width of 3 lines. The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, the most holy part of the Jewish scriptures, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, must terminate exactly with a line. They'd throw it out if it didn't. Copyists were required to sit in full Jewish dress. They couldn't show up in their jeans and their t-shirt. There was an absolute reverence for the scriptures and the name of God, such that a fresh quill was used each time the sacred name of God was penned. Also, scribes even refused to acknowledge the presence of a king when writing God's name. And then the scribes must produce a master copy. So it talked in here about the Masoretic texts, which were from the Masoretes, who edited and standardized the Hebrew text so that everyone had the same language, exactly the same language. And they also added vowel points to ensure proper pronunciation. Hebrew is notoriously difficult to pronounce. In Esther, and we might study Esther this year. We'll see. Now it's. Anyone want to give it a shot? Yeah, I joke when I teach Esther that this is why I don't want to learn Hebrew. It's Vayahi. Can you see how maybe some vowels would help the old Hebrew language out a little bit? Yeah, so even they've kind of figured that out. By the way, it's and this is what happened. That's what it means, and this is what happened. That's how Esther began. So they added vowel points. They calculated the middle word of every page. And if there were more than 3 mistakes in a manuscript, it was destroyed. It wasn't suitable. So I told you that we were talking about textual criticism. And so now we're going to compare like this textual criticism, this manuscript comparison. We're going to compare the Bible to, and specifically the New Testament, to other ancient writings, and we've seen a little bit of this. But I'm going to begin with a quote from Dr. F.F. Bruce. He said this: "There is no body of ancient literature in the world which enjoys such a wealth of good textual attestation as the New Testament." In other words, he's saying there's nothing else written in ancient history that is as sure and as faithful and as true. Not just true, like, yes, it's true what it says is true, but that we can know better that the New Testament we hold in our hands is exactly what was written, more than when you read the Iliad in English class. But nobody says to you, nobody hands you the Iliad and says, yeah, but this isn't really what he wrote. Homer didn't really say that. Nobody says that. Right? But we can be more sure about the New Testament than we could be about the Iliad. So let's show kind of a comparison, and the whiteboard video talks about this. So Caesar, he wrote from 100 to 44 BC. The earliest copy of what he wrote that we have is from AD 900, and that's a span of 1,000 years. And we have 10 copies of everything that we have from Julius Caesar is contained in 10 copies. Anybody ever say Julius Caesar didn't exist? Julius Caesar didn't do that. Never. Right? Plato, great philosopher and teacher in Greece, he wrote from 427 to 347 BC. The earliest copy was found in AD 900, or is from AD 900, and that's 1,200 years between writing and oldest copy. And we only have 7 things that Plato wrote. Sophocles wrote from 496 to 406 BC, and the first copy was from AD 1000, 1400 years again. And we have a whopping 193 things that Sophocles wrote. And then Aristotle, from 384 to 322 BC, earliest copy 1100, 1400 years between the first copy and the writing. And then 49 copies of anything that Aristotle wrote. So here's another quote by Dr. Harold Greenlee. Since scholars accept as generally true the writings of the ancient classics, even though the earliest MSS, the earliest handwritten copies of ancient writings, were written so long after the original writings, and the number of extant, meaning surviving copies of those writings, is in many instances so small, it is clear that the reliability of the text of the New Testament is likewise secure. In other words, we have way more copies of the New Testament than we have of anything else in ancient history. And nobody questions those. If you're not going to question Aristotle and Julius Caesar and Plato, you can't question John and no. and Timothy, or who? Not Timothy, Luke, or anybody else. Here's Dr. Bruce Metzger. In the entire range of ancient Greek and Latin literature, the Iliad ranks next in line to the New Testament in possessing the greatest amount of manuscript testimony. And so here's the blowout. Guys that play basketball, if you lost 24,000 to 643, would you be happy about scoring 643 points in that game? No, you would not, because they scored 24,000. It's not even a contest. So there's 500 years between the earliest copy and when Homer wrote the Iliad. And we only have 640, that's number 2, 643 copies of the Iliad. The New Testament was written from AD 40-ish to 100. And the earliest copy is from 125 AD. And that's approximately, I don't know why I put 0.25 years. That's not true. But about 25 to 60 years. And we have over 24,000 copies. And all of the copies that we have were within my lifetime from when it happened. In 1963, somebody help me, anybody who took English, the Cuban Missile Crisis, 63-ish, 62-ish, right around in there. I was alive. That's all I know. So I was born in 61, so it had to be 62, 63. And we were living here. My dad was Missile era, actually, and he was here. And my dad knew what was going down. He was just a major, I think. I think he was a major. But he knew what was going down. He sent my mother and my sister and me to Dodge City, where my grandmother lived, because he knew that if the Russians were going to launch those missiles, those nuclear missiles, they were going to land on Bellevue, and he didn't want us here. Now, do you believe that? It's a true story. I didn't know it till I was an adult. I didn't know a lot of things. I didn't know my dad was flying in and out of Vietnam until I was flying power missions. It's just that. I mean, I know to you, like 1963 sounds like ancient history, but trust me, in another 40-ish years, you're going to be my age. And you're going to go, where did it go? And 2021 is going to seem like yesterday. And that's all it is. It's yesterday compared to the gap between all of those other those other books. So, and including the Iliad. So this is what Dr. Floyd McKelvey says. Even if so, this is talking about all of the many manuscripts we have. We have little fragments, like little teeny fragments, up to whole copies of the New Testament and everything in between. And we have lots of them. So here's what Dr. McKelvey says about it. Even if someone deliberately or by accident amended or corrupted a manuscript, it would be corrected by the many other manuscripts available. To sum up, unless we want to throw a blanket over all of history and say there is nothing knowable about the past, no history that can be trusted, no Grecian or Roman history, no Aristotle, no or Plato or Socrates, we had better not make any claims against the historicity and accuracy of the New Testament. The New Testament documents are far more numerous, older, demonstrably more accurate historically, and have been examined by a far greater battery of scholars, both friend and foe, both people who are believers and people who are non-believers, than any other ancient manuscripts put together. They have met the test impeccably. Here's the thing. If we're going to say we can't trust the Bible, we can't trust that the Bible we hold in our hands is what those people wrote those many years ago, then we need to throw out world history. We have to throw out any ancient history. Because this is what the people wrote, is far more proof than anything. Yet nobody says, what do you mean Alexander the Great was a warrior? He never existed. It's because of what this says. Not because of the evidence. It's because of what this says that people say, there's a bowling alley that's going in on there. It's because of what it says that people hate it and they don't believe it. They don't want to believe that it's true. So we're gonna end there, and we're gonna pick up with prophecy tomorrow.